It doesn't matter if you're a woodworker or someone looking to have a new dining table made. The price of lumber these days will likely leave you feeling shell-shocked. But have you ever wondered how much money you actually save by taking a tree that just fell down from a storm or new construction and then turning it into usable wood? Or is it even worth the hassle at all? Now, our area was recently hit hard by a hurricane and the storm knocked over hundreds of thousands of mature trees. So I'm here at M2 Lumber, run by my buddy, Matt Morgan, and we're going to take you through the entire process by talking about the actual costs, logistics, and how to make sure no one is taking advantage of you.
The most important question you're likely asking yourself is, can I even mill my logs? People tend to overestimate how big their tree is, and most for-hire mills won't touch anything that's less than 12 inches in diameter and 4 feet long. Conversely, even large-size mills can only handle up to 55-inch diameter logs and 21 feet long. So be sure to call and discuss with your local sawyer what sizes they can work with.
Now, before you or a tree service fire up the chainsaw, make sure you come up with a plan or explain to them what sizes you need. 8 to 12 foot logs will give you the most flexibility when it's time to mill and for your future projects. It's likely everything but the trunk is going to be waste unless you have some thicker branches that are actually straight, but that's very, very rare. Best case would be to call your sawmill and see if they have any tree service companies they can recommend as well. Cutting a tree for saw grade logs requires some attention to detail, and someone inexperienced can potentially ruin a good log. It's just unbelievably heavy. I don't know why I'm even holding this.
If you have trees that meet your mill size requirements, it's good to identify the species to help decide if having the tree or logs milled is even worth it. If you're not sure of what type of tree you have, you can easily identify most species of wood by matching pictures of the leaves or the bark online. Even better if they produce fruit or flowers. Now bear in mind, when I say worth it, I'm speaking strictly of dollar value, not emotional value. If your tree has memories and sentiments attached to it, then who cares what it costs? A cheap tree species would be something like pine, poplar, or red oak, whereas highly sought-after woods such as white oak, cherry, and walnut can be 3 to 4 times the cost per board foot.
Now, if you're watching this and you have no clue what board foot means, don't worry. It's actually a measure of volume that is calculated by multiplying a board's length times thickness times width and then dividing all of that by 144. You can file this under one of the many weird things that woodworkers do to make something easy way more complicated. It's basically the story of our lives.
So you're probably wondering how many board feet is in your log, and if you've never worked at a sawmill before, then you might not be too familiar with how to calculate that. It's a little complicated in details, but long story short, there are very simple scales that are used in industry to approximate the usable lumber in logs, using only the length and the diameter. The smaller the log, the worse the waste percentage will be. The 3 popular ones used are the Doyle, the Scribner, and the International Scale, but my favorite is the Doyle. And there are even apps that you can download on your phone to do this calculation for you. We'll leave links down below.
Now, another consideration is what you actually want built. For instance, if it's an outdoor project and then your tree is not a species that does well outdoors, like this walnut log here, then you're likely wasting your time. Now, for the woodworkers out there that are watching this video, I'm sure you can relate to this text that I got from my friend Ellen after the hurricane knocked over their favorite backyard tree. And I'm sure you can see where this is going when I got there. So you want all of that built out of these 2 tiny logs and that broken branch.
Yeah.
They're 5 feet long.
Right. Could you use like some wood glue and like a vise and just like squeeze them together? Does it really need to be all 8 feet?
Oh my. Needless to say, it's important to match the tree to the project. Plus, you want to have an understanding of waste and processing, which we will cover in more detail later on. Now, before you're ready to tackle that hurdle, though, you need a way to get your log to a sawmill. And I think this is the most overlooked part of the entire process. Your average 20-inch diameter log that is 8 feet long weighs over 800 pounds. So you're going to need a way to lift that into the back of a truck or on a trailer. Now, it's also possible to hire your own tree service to haul your logs to a sawmill for an additional cost. Just double check with them before they show up. The best case would be to actually plan ahead and you hire a tree service company that is willing to deliver your logs to a mill. Considering most landfills charge by the ton to dump organic waste, they'll probably be more than happy to do this for you.
In general, it's best to mill logs as soon as possible after felling. However, that rarely happens. Most wood species fare pretty well for a few months before they start showing signs of fungal rot. So don't wait too long, like I did with these over here. When you do have contact with a mill, make sure you understand all of the costs associated with processing your logs and how they will charge you. Some mills charge by the hour, others will charge a flat rate, and some charge by the board foot. There are mobile sawmills that might come to your property and mill everything up on site, but they are few and far between. Plus, they are likely to charge a big premium. However they charge, make sure you have a solid number before getting started. We charge a flat rate of $130 an hour, and we always give our customers an estimated time frame before milling. This log, for example, would probably only take us about an hour, and we have a 1 hour minimum. Another potential cost is blade damage fees. That can vary between $50 and $75 a piece. This is common when milling urban logs that we may come across barbed wire, nails, or even screws, which damage our saw blades.
Now, as far as the type of cut and how thick, a lot of this is going to be project dependent, but for the type of boards that you want, the most common you're going to see from sawmills these days are slabs. And you've likely heard this referred to as live edge, which is the muse of all the epoxy river table folk out there. Now, if you don't love the look of a natural edge, you can always ask for slabs, and then you cut them off when you start building, which we appropriately call dead edge.
Trademark pending.
But a better route is to ask for dimensional boards at nominal widths, depending on the size of your tree and the projects that you have planned, like Dinkle here. But regardless of slabs or dimensional, you'll need to tell the sawyer how thick to cut everything. I made the mistake when I was first starting out of having some boards milled at 1 1/4, also known as 5/4, because I wanted a finished thickness of 1 inch. Now, these were particularly wonky pieces, and by the time that we dried them and then processed them with the jointer and planer, they ended up around 3/4 of an inch, so a little bit shy. So if you want a 2-inch thick slab dining table, have them cut your wood at least 2.5 inches, really 3 to be safe. Now, if you're someone without any woodworking experience and this all sounds exciting, or you're just getting going building projects, I've got great news for you. For the past year, I've been working with Chris from Four Eyes Furniture and Sean from Sean Boyd Made This to create a beginner woodworking course. Now, pushing modesty to the side, we think this is the best beginner woodworking course, period. So we named it that. We're getting ready to launch soon, so if this interests you, I'll leave a link below to sign up, and you can be the first notified for when it's available. And you'll be able to take advantage of our introductory pricing.
Awesome news. You've got your wood all milled up, so it's time to build something beautiful, right? Not quite. After you've got your logs milled into lumber comes the hardest part, waiting. And if you choose not to kiln dry your lumber, the general rule is 1 year per inch of thickness, which means it could take over 2 years before you can start building. The good news is your overall costs are going to be very low. The bad news is you also need a place to properly stack and store the wood yourself for the duration. Your sawmill might be able to store your lumber for you, but just check with them on the associated storage costs and also make sure they store it properly and safely, which means stickered, undercovered, and open air. Wet wood is like cooked spaghetti, and it will take whatever shape it's laying on, meaning you can essentially ruin all that hard work if your boards aren't stored properly. If you're looking to bypass the waiting time and ensure bugs have been permanently evicted from your boards, consider having your wood kiln dried. Your boards won't go straight from the mill to the kiln because most operations do prefer to have the wood partially air dried before finishing off in the kiln. There's a couple good reasons for this. First of all, by air drying your lumber, you allow the wood to reduce in moisture content at a gentle and low stress environment. This greatly reduces the chances of drying defects in the kiln, such as case hardening, warping, and checking. Secondly, by allowing your wood to air dry, it reduces the amount of time needed in the actual kiln, which reduces your overall cost. The length of time needed to air dry your lumber before the kiln will vary depending on the wood species and the thickness. We target what's called the fiber saturation point in the kiln drying world, and this is typically around 20% moisture content for most wood species. On average, we let everything sit for 3 to 6 months, but there are so many variables. So how much should you be paying? The cost for kiln drying can be very confusing and also very expensive. Again, some places may charge by the job and others by the board foot. In the end, what affects the drying cost are 2 simple factors. How much space does your wood require, and how long does it need to be in the kiln? For lower density woods like poplar, you can expect to spend anywhere in the range of $1 to $1.50 per board foot. And for thicker boards and higher density woods like oak, you can pay closer to $2 to $3 per board foot. There are many different types of kilns in existence, and as someone who built their own solar kiln in 2018 and is now the proud owner of an electric vacuum kiln, I'm quite familiar with the differences, advantages, and disadvantages. Most important fact is to make sure your wood is reaching a steady state temperature of 140 degrees for a minimum of 4 hours. Some dude's basement with a Harbor Freight dehumidifier is not a kiln. He's just a potential serial killer.
Whether you choose to have the mill dry your lumber or wait it out naturally at home, always be sure to double check the moisture content thoroughly before working with your wood. Matt and I have a video that goes into detail about the actual numbers you should be looking for, and I'll leave a link below. If you're not a woodworker, you might be confused when you hear us mention jointer and planer. Now, even though the wood is dry and ready for use, it's still rough and basically looks like this. It needs to be machined so it's square and flat using these specialty tools, or a CNC. Again, expect to pay for that, or double check whomever is building your furniture for you has these tools at their disposal. The good news is, even if you're not ready to build something new, you can dry stack your lumber for years without ruining the boards.
So knowing all of that, is it worth it? A typical mature tree can make several good-sized logs. A 12-foot log, approximately 20 inches in diameter, yields about 200 board feet of lumber. So getting 500 board feet of lumber from a tree is not unreasonable. You should expect to pay around 30 to 80 cents per board foot for milling your logs. Much more than that, and I'd say you're getting ripped off. Now let's average that and say you pay 50 cents per board foot. So that's $250 to have your logs milled, plus the cost for delivery, maybe another 250 bucks. If you choose to not dry kiln your wood, that means that you're looking at around $500 total for 500 board feet. However, if you do choose to kiln dry, that's another $750 to $1,500, depending on the thickness and the species. You may find that this puts the cost of milling some cheaper wood species, such as pine, poplar, or red oak, more than the cost for you to simply purchase directly from your local lumberyard. And that sometimes is the case. On the flip side, more valuable wood species such as walnut, white oak, and cherry should be well worth the cost of milling and drying, which in most cases shouldn't be more than $4 per board foot all in, which is less than half of the retail price of walnut. One tip, if you're still set to process your beautiful pine log, try to get some friends to chip in and split the overall cost, or ask to see if your sawmill is willing to trade. If you have really nice lumber, they might be willing to give you a discount in exchange for some of the boards. But don't expect to get full value for the board though.
Now, milling your own logs can be worth the time and money. Just be sure to do your own research and figure your total cost and understand the value of your lumber. And again, if it has sentimental value, you really can't put a price on it. But for the sake of this video, let's say depending on where you buy your wood from in the country, anything below $4 and you're probably going to be losing money instead of just buying it. Anything above that is all gravy.
And not to mention, having your trees milled into lumber does actually preserve one of our most abundant natural resources. That's why our motto is save the trees. If you don't mill it, it's likely going to become mulch or fungal food.
If you have any more questions, be sure to leave them below and we'll do our best to answer them. And if you're local to the Southeast, be sure to check out M2 Lumber, and we'll see you on the next one.